In this video, I would like to build a little sample, a couple of pages sample, that allows the user to build a pizza. That's the page that I have right here, the page where I will give the user a form so that they're able to select different options to build a pizza. What I'd like to do then is I'd like to have the form on this page submit to the second page that I've begun, show pizza. And what I want to do on that page is really to just show the options for the pizza that the user selected. So back over on the build pizza page, let me get started. I'm going to begin here by putting in a form for the user. I'm going to have it submit to the show pizza page. I'm going to have it submit using the post method. There we go. It's a good start for my form. For the first option I want to provide for the user, I'm going to let them choose the size of the pizza. To do that, let's see, I'll give them a label for a field called size. I'll let them choose the actual size of the pizza here. There we are. And I have a choice of different form controls that I could use. I could give the user a text field, right? Of course, then I'd have to deal with the problem of what happens if the user types in something unexpected. What would probably be better in this case of size would be something a little more controlled. Maybe a select component that gives them the different sizes that are available to choose from. Same basic thing could be done with radio buttons, but it would take up more room. I think in this case what I'll do is I'll just use a select component. So I'll create a select component. I'm going to give it the name of size. And let me fill in some different options for them. Let's just try large as the default, medium as a second option, and small. Should be good enough. If I hop over to my browser and take a look, that's what my form looks like right now. The user can go ahead and choose their size. I'll go ahead and select large and hit continue, and that takes me over to my show pizza page. Over on my show pizza page, can I show the size that the user selected? Well, that should be easy. If I simply say echo size, and then I'll append to that the value of $_post size. And I'll throw a break on the end because there'll be other output I want to show after that here in a minute. That seems to work. Everything seems to be just fine right there. If I go back to my original page and I select medium as my size and submit, medium is what I see show up on my show pizza page. If you haven't guessed already, the reason that I'm bringing this basic subject up again is to point out the fact that what we've been working with when we deal with HTTP requests, the $_get and $_post variables that I was referring to before, are actually arrays. Now that we've talked about numerically indexed and associative arrays, hopefully you recognize it as such if you didn't previously. You can see here that the post array that I'm actually using is an associative array. The key that I'm accessing is a key called size. Where the actual get and post arrays come from is that the PHP server builds them for us automatically. That's how the PHP server actually handles the different values that are submitted as parts of requests. When the user submits the form from our build pizza page, the request includes values, including a value for something called size, right there from our select component. When PHP sees that value show up at its doorstep, it takes that and any other values that may also be a part of this form and turns them all into an array. If the values came from a post request, it puts them into an array called $_post. If it comes from a get request, it puts them into an array called $_get, and it just labels each element of the array with the name that went along with the value when it came in as part of the request. So size was the name of the element that was submitted from the form. Size becomes the key that's used in the associative array to store the value that was submitted. That's what that is. All right, well that seems easy enough, I hope. Let's move on and add more to our form. I'm going to put my select component here into a paragraph. Just keep my form nice, neat, and tidy. Then I'm going to put in another paragraph, and what I want to do here is I want to allow the user to choose the toppings that are going to go on their pizza. Let me give them a little bit of text. I'm going to say choose your toppings. Then let me do a label for, let's do topping cheese. I'll put in cheese as the actual text, and then I'm going to give the user a radio button. The radio button's type I'm going to set to checkbox. I'm going to make its name toppings, I think is the way I'll do it. I'll give it an ID of topping cheese, and I'm going to give it a value of, no comma needed there, cheese. If I hop over to my browser and take a look, I'm on the wrong page. Let me go back. There we go. That's what it looks like. Choose your topping cheese. Let me put a break in there. There we are. So they can click the checkbox to choose cheese. Now the reason I chose a checkbox in this particular case is because I of course want to show them more than one option, more than one topping that I want to have available to them. And I want the user to be able to pick any or all of, any combination of these different toppings. So now that I have that first basic one done, let me throw a break after it. I'm going to copy it and let me make another one. What else do people put on pizzas besides cheese? Let's do mushrooms, topping, mushrooms, mushrooms, and mushrooms. There's my second checkbox. For one, let's give them one more. 3 is a nice round number. Besides mushrooms, let's put in peppers. So I'll fill in peppers everywhere I had cheese in there before. There we are. I think we've got it. All right, with my 3 checkboxes in place, there they are. The way I actually have them set up, of course, is with a label and a checkbox for each of the different toppings. I've set up all 3 of the checkboxes so that they have the same name. That's the way that radio buttons and checkboxes are usually going to be coded. Everything that belongs in a particular group will have the same name. Each one of my checkboxes, however, has its own unique ID, which is how I tie the label to each one of those individual checkboxes. And each one of the checkboxes has the actual value of what it represents. So if the user checks any one of the 3 checkboxes, it should be the actual value that submits, and the name it will submit under is toppings. If I go back over to my browser, take a look, there are my 3 checkboxes. I can go through and check or uncheck any of the 3 that I want. I think I'll make a mushroom and cheese pizza. I'll go ahead and select large, and when I continue, it takes me over to my Show Pizza page. Now, let's look at, on the Show Pizza page, what we would need to do in order to be able to show our toppings. Let me say echo toppings. And then, just like before, let's go to our post array and show the topping. Not sure if I'm going to put anything else after it, but just in case, I'll go ahead and throw in a break anyway. There we go. I'm getting toppings mushrooms. Well, but wait, didn't I select cheese and mushrooms? Let's go back and give that another shot. If I go back to my initial form and let's say I choose cheese and submit, I get cheese. If I refresh my order page and choose mushrooms, I get mushrooms. If I refresh my order page again and choose peppers, I get peppers. So everything there seems to be okay. But what if I choose cheese and peppers? I only get peppers. What if I choose mushroom and peppers? I only get peppers. What if I choose cheese and mushroom? I only get mushroom. Do you see what's happening? Essentially, no matter what group, whatever combination of checkboxes I check, it appears that only the last checkbox's value is actually being sent to the server. There's actually a really good reason for this. It's very logical if you think about it. Here in this situation, for example, where I choose cheese and mushrooms, those 2 different elements, cheese and mushrooms for toppings, what actually happens when that gets submitted to the server is 2 values show up, cheese and mushrooms, that both say that their name is toppings. What the PHP server then does when it's creating the post array is it creates an element in the post array called toppings. Since cheese was the first value that arrived, it goes ahead and it assigns the value of cheese to the toppings element of the post array. When it then also sees, though, that there is a mushrooms element that is a part of the thing called toppings that goes with the name called toppings, PHP then takes and assigns the mushroom value to the toppings element of the post array, which means that the cheese value that was previously in the toppings element gets replaced. It gets replaced by the mushrooms. That's why we keep seeing only the last value that's checked in the checkboxes showing up on our final page. Is there a way that we could actually fix that, make that work? There is. There's actually a couple of different possible ways. One way is to not use the same name for all the checkboxes. We could give each one of the checkboxes its own individual name, and then we could check on the Show Pizza page for each one of those individual names. That could potentially work, but it's going to get more and more complicated the more checkboxes we have. So there's another option that I actually think is a lot simpler. Of course, it's only simpler if you understand it, but let me show you how this would work. What I can do here is with each one of my checkboxes, instead of just giving it a plain name like toppings, I'm going to put in toppings and then a square brace. Now keep in mind this looks like I'm creating an array, but I'm actually doing this in HTML itself. In the actual HTML code to create a checkbox, when I give that checkbox a name, I'm saying name it toppings, open close square braces. Seems a little bit odd, like an odd thing to do in HTML, but it ends up having an effect when those values get submitted over to the PHP. What will happen is that when the values get submitted to the PHP and PHP sees there's an element called toppings open close square brace, PHP will take that to mean that we don't want just a single thing called toppings, we actually want it to create an array called toppings. So this will have the end effect of allowing the post array to be able to store multiple values for something called toppings. So over here on my show pizza page, when my toppings value actually gets submitted, $_post toppings at that point is not a single value, it's actually another array. So at that point what we're dealing with is actually a multi-dimensional array, an array that is stored as a value inside another array. The outer array is the $_post array, and then stored inside that array element called toppings, there is a sub-array called toppings. Let's see what effect that has when I run it in my browser. If I'm on my Build Pizza page, I went ahead and refreshed it, and if I choose cheese and peppers and click continue, when I get over to my Show Pizza page now, I'm actually now getting an error message. And notice, it's telling me array to string conversion on line 13. What it's complaining about on line 13 here is that I'm basically asking PHP to echo what is now actually an array, and PHP does not know how to just automatically echo an array. It needs a little bit of help to be able to do something like that. There's a few different ways I could potentially make this work. One of the easier is to use one of PHP's built-in string functions, a function called join. What I can do with the join function is I can pass it the array that I want to have joined. In this case, I'm saying join together all the different values that are a part of the toppings array inside the post array, and then I can tell it how to join them together. Basically, it needs some character that it'll use to put between each individual value of the array so that it can then convert them into a string. I always forget if the separator character is supposed to go before or after the array. Let me try doing it this way. I'm going to say put a comma and a space between each element is what I'm shooting for. Let's see how that looks in the browser. It seems to be pretty happy with it. I guess I guessed right. So now for toppings, it's showing both cheese and peppers. Right? If I go back to the previous page and I choose cheese and mushroom, then I get cheese and mushroom, and if I come back and I choose all three of my possible toppings, I get all three of them listed. So just to run through again how this is working, checkboxes are available for each one of the different toppings. Each one of those checkboxes has the names toppings and a set of square braces. Because of the square braces, when this request is sent to PHP, PHP will take that to mean it should create an array called toppings. Because those values come in as part of a post request, the toppings array that's created is stored inside the post array itself, where I then take that array and ask PHP to join the values together into a string by combining them together by putting a comma and a space between each one of them. That string gets joined together. I append that in with the rest of the string here, which then gets echoed, and I'm showing my toppings for the pizza that the user selected. That's all there is to it.